Please don't forget the money, man.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a Bentley.
Holy hot cross buns. Reporting. It's 7:30 a.m. reporting from Tucson, Arizona. This is the Michael Welch Podcast. Touching base, it's been a couple weeks now since the NCAA Championship. Of course, last recorded a podcast on the Sweet 16 with Elliott and wrote a couple thoughts on the national championship game on the website. However, it went kind of as expected. UConn again winning by double digits, another championship back-to-back now. And top three teams in the tournament were probably Houston, with the unfortunate injury there that kept them from pulling out a big win. Purdue and UConn. Actually, the final AP poll had Houston number 2 ahead of Purdue, if that's any indication. So it was UConn, Houston, and Purdue. The Final Four, very interesting, of course. NC State and Alabama. Great NC State story and run there with DJ Burns. And Alabama with Nate Oates was great run there. Year past Brandon Miller and his incident, what was going on there. And with, I guess, a more modern approach, if you will. Threes and a quick tempo, but not quite the defense to make things work, although they did have a great defensive run to get to the Final Four. Now, UConn was quite interesting. They shot 30% from three for the tournament and still managed to rack up, at this point, 12, going back to last year, 12 straight wins of double digits, which breaks the previous record of five or six, I believe, to win the back-to-back chips here. Dan Hurley, of course, has the program clicking. Looks like the best coach in the country at this particular moment. Continues to reload. 3 new starters this season. And already in the transfer portal, picking up new bodies. Michigan centers heading over there for next year. I'm just not positive. Next year's NBA draft has a lot of questions about who's at the top, who's going to be rise to the top of that class. We know that the number one kid there is already falling down the draft board a little bit. A kid out there, one of the foreign prospects, was originally looked like a number 1 pick, and Zachary, I believe it is, it's moving around the draft boards. But the point is, with the great run like this, all 5 starters have risen quite a bit. Zach Edey has moving up quite a bit too, and I'm just not sure there are a lot of top NBA picks here, but I think that's more a reflection of the NBA draft class here. The guys are now officially starting to declare for the NBA draft. I would assume all 5 starters would, and of course Edey's are already declared and going. I'm just not sure. Edey could go lottery. Klingon looks like he's going to go in the lottery. I'm just not quite sure that we actually have guys that are going to be meaningful contributors here. I'm thinking of JaVale McGee and how he's still in the league and playing at the end of the bench there. And he's not too much different than what we get in maybe like not exactly like a Zach Edey, but he's someone that doesn't shoot from the perimeter, can block shots, has good size. He's over 7 feet tall, and he doesn't really play. So I just have a hard time seeing someone drafting Zach Edey at like the 18th pick and being really excited about it. Being excited about drafting a guy you hope can play 20 minutes a game and maybe off the bench, not even starting. So I just have a hard time with that. And I'm also thinking about the Warriors, who for years have played a rotating cast of centers when they're not playing Draymond Green at the 5 in small ball. And I just have a hard time seeing Klingon or Zach Edey as really valuable high draft picks. And if they are, then I think it's more indicative of how weak this draft class is, which is being projected as one of the worst in a long time. And that doesn't bode well for some of the guys at the top, like the home state Detroit Pistons, or even the rebuilding Spurs. You'd like to see them build a great team around Wemby there. Victor Wembanyama, who's performed excellent this season, and they're not going to have an ability to draft a real high-quality prospect around him. But back to the NCAA tournament here. Again, UConn reloading year after year with Dan Hurley here. They've shown great progression with him in year 5 here as the head coach. And they'll already start to look good for next season. Not shooting great from 3. The game overall, they didn't play particularly well. Purdue seemed to have a pretty good defensive strategy. There were a number of times where Zach Edey was in drop coverage trying to prevent guards from driving, and they shot difficult attempts over the top of him. Klingon did a good job defensively. Edey, of course, scored a number of points early on in this game, but Klingon did a good job just kind of walling and manning him up. They didn't double Edey. They did a good job kind of just allowing him to get his and not allowing the Purdue Boilermakers to shoot from the perimeter. Pretty embarrassing. 7 3-point attempts for Purdue, the lowest attempt they've had in 8 years. And as the second most efficient 3-point shooting team in the country, I don't know why you couldn't find a way to get more attempts off. That seems just atrocious. And stating that the Huskies played good defense is fine, good perimeter defense, but I just think that's horribly embarrassing for Matt Painter to not find a way to make that work. So, just bad performance by Purdue there. Outside of Zach Edey, he did score 5, so meaningful. 5 buckets on David Klingon on post-ups, and Klingon only allowed 2 the entire season, which is just incredible there. And another double-double for Zach Edey, but just nothing outside of that. 37 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks for him. 12 points, 8 assists, 2 steals for Braden Smith. The rest of the team had 11 points on 5 for 17 shooting. That is outrageous. And even Edey himself, despite having 37 points, went for about an 8-minute stretch without scoring in the middle of the game. So, just a great defensive job by UConn more than anything. And I'm not sure that they played an A or A-plus game throughout the entire tournament run. I've heard some comments that this may be the best team that they've had in a while, and I don't actually know if that's true. Yet they come away with big wins all the way through against good competition, arguably some of the best teams, at least this year. They beat the best teams this year in the way through tournament. So maybe that just shows how dominating they really are and how good a coaching job Hurley is really doing. Castle, freshman for UConn, 15 points, 5 rebounds. Cam Spencer at 11 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. Klingon had a modest 11 points, 5 rebounds, an assist and a block, but played really good. He did go to the bench with some foul trouble for a little bit. Hassan Daira came off the bench, had 9 points, and did all right. So, good production for those guys, although, again, 3-point shooting was not very good. They did have 14 offensive rebounds by 7 different players on 30 for 62 shooting, which is a 42% offensive rebound rate on their misses. So Purdue couldn't do anything right. When you get the ball back, 42% of the time when you miss for another attempt, then there's a good chance that you are going to win. In a violent nature, is a film that I had bookmarked for a while. The trailer came out a couple months ago. I hadn't looked up a lot of details about this movie. I'm all tongue-tied over it. Just watched it. It turns out it was originally released to Shudder, the horror streaming service. It's a first-time director, and it did so well at Sundance that it obtained a theatrical release here at the end of May. And the trailer that I originally saw, which looked like a kind of a new spin on a classic horror monster guy going through the woods and, a camp situation, killing people. It kind of looked like that with the perspective that it's from the antagonist's point of view. And that's what the trailer looks like if you pull it up. Now, even in the trailer, you hear the sound of the woods, kind of an ambiance type of sound. You get, a couple of attacks on screen in the trailer, but you're not quite exactly sure what you're in for. Is this a new franchise type of deal? Do you ever see this monster's face? How many characters are there? Is this going to be a lot of kills right off the bat? Is this going to be a film where you do a lot of just walking through the woods? A lot of questions about what kind of movie this was going to be exactly, and just not quite sure what to expect. I didn't look into it too much before going in. I just thought it looked really creepy as hell. So, with that in mind, the movie was great. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It is indeed from the perspective of our antagonist. We do get a few clips of the folks that he's going after in this summer camp situation. Very much kind of a Jason movie, even though this antagonist has a different name and a different background, which we do get. Now, this is not going to be for everyone. We do have cutscenes where we're not always trampling through the woods, and we do fit our kills in. We do get a little background and mythos to this new person. So we do get all of that. And like most horror movies, we get a interpretive ending. So I don't think I'm ruining anything. There's no spoilers in any of that. Now, a couple notes. Not every kill is on camera per se. Some of it's inferred, some of it's not quite seen. The kills that are on camera are quite brutal. There's a new one on here that is, had the movie theater I was in quite, it was awful. Had someone dry heaving in the theater I was in. So if you're a fan of unique kills and really horror movies, slashers, these kind of guys going after kids in the woods, that kind of thing, there's a new one in here for you. If you're not sure about that, whether it's not your particular kind of horror or you're just kind of into scary movies per se, then maybe midway through there's a kill that may not be for you. Whether you close your eyes during that, there are a few brutal kills in here, absolutely. Now, it's really cool because I have not seen a movie from, like, the villain's perspective, mostly. Although, supposedly, there's been movies like this before, kind of like this. I've not seen anything quite like this. Also, the sound is very important in this. The movie theater that I was in did not seem to do that justice. And maybe you can see this in IMAX. I'm not sure about the theatrical releases. I'm more excited to actually see this again. I don't rewatch a lot of movies, a lot of material. There's so much out there. I always like to experience something new, and I have a decent memory about remembering key points in what I watch. And I'm on Letterboxd now. I don't write a ton of reviews on there, but I do log what I watch. And so I'm able to at least go back and see what I've touched on in the past. So I don't revisit a lot of things. But come spooky season, in a few months here, whether it's August, September, October, and I'm able to probably stream this at home, whether it's on Shudder or another, streaming service, I'll be happy to do that and set up kind of a louder surround sound type deal, because I think that is best viewing for this. The ambience noise, the woods, the insects, the twigs crunching are all important aspects of this film. We do have voices of different distances as characters approach or walk away that are different volumes. When I was in the theater, there are times when if someone's munching on popcorn next to me, I couldn't quite hear what was going on. And, it'd be much easier I watched a lot of things with subtitles, as I think a lot of people do now. But the sound is very important for both voices and I think the full range of what's going on in the film. Also the kill scenes. Of course, the sounds of what's going on there. So it's very interesting that the sound is very much like another character in this film. I thought that was very cool, besides the perspective of the antagonist going around. So it's kind of like a flip view of Jason is the best kind of franchise to use for this. Jason attacking different camps. It's, I think, at least from my perspective, when I'm watching different movies like that, I'm thinking, okay, so where's the killer at this point? If folks are out, the victims are out at the campfire and something goes wrong, or they're out hiking in the woods, where is the predator at this moment? And this kind of gives you that kind of perspective. Where is he as he's setting up these attacks and that kind of thing. So I think it's unique in that perspective, and just a very, very cool film. I really liked it a lot. Again, it is slower moving at points. They do cut scenes, so you're not always in slow moving portions, but it's not like we have some super fast moving antagonist here. Once we get moving to some of the more actiony shots, things obviously do pick up a little bit into the second and third acts of the film. Now, there are a few nitpicks you could have in the movie. Nothing that, is worth covering spoiler-free here. But for the most part, if you don't mind some of the plotting sequences that have payoffs for, violent deaths and just unique perspective and this kind of cool ambiance surround sound, if none of that sounds interesting to you, then you're probably going to have a rough time here. If you think some of the problems you have with other movies, whether it's kind of a more vague plot or kind of some open-ended aspects to a mythical, guy or villain with some questionable spots in a plot and some questionable decisions by our victims trying to get away, then, you have a little bit of that here. But other than that, I think it's a unique movie. I think it's got some cool aspects to it, and I very much enjoyed it. I'm excited for others to go see and experience it as well. Again, it's probably better in a home viewing environment or in some way where you can really get a nice hold of a surround sound type deal. I think that's very important to viewing this film. I've not heard that analysis from anyone else. I did check a few notes before laying my own, I put my own thoughts together out there, then listened to a few reviews, and I haven't heard anyone say anything about that, but I think that's so critically important to the viewing of this film more than anything else that I've watched recently. I think that's a big piece with no, background track or anything like that. Just a big piece of just the, raw noise, if you will. So a great job by a first-time director, by the name of Chris something. I'll have to get it here in a minute. But just a great job here. Shudder does have, I haven't been on there a whole lot, but quite a few original films, and it's just great to see one that does something a little different like this, that's successful enough to make a theatrical release. And I'm just very happy to see something a little different. Chris Nash, the director, and the cinematographer, Pierce Dirks, has done work on a lot of other projects, and there's not any CGI here, I don't think. A lot of just physical effects, or natural-looking effects, whatever it's called, from the violence and stuff like that. So just a very cool way to kind of put this film together. So not a super technical way to describe it, but the reviews, I think, are kind of mixed all over the place, depending on expectations for the film and just kind of folks' flavor palette in general for this kind of thing. But you're not going to go in for just an action-packed film right off the bat. So again, a bit of a slow burn, a little bit plotting, not too much. You got your cool kills in here. You got a little bit unique perspective. Sound is important. And I think it's just a really cool little film that's anyone that's a fan of this kind of slasher stuff, or just a good, little bit different horror movie in the time of all of these stupid Nun movies and the Conjuring remakes, will really enjoy this kind of thing. So I give 4 out of 5 stars on first viewing to In a Violent Nature, the 2024 horror drama. I don't know about that. Horror slasher film. Very much enjoyed it. All right, Mavs, Celtics, NBA Finals start this Thursday. And it's just what we expected, right? Now, the Celtics took 2 losses en route to the finals there. Of course, they had a little luck, you could say, en route to the finals there. A lot of teams missing their top players, unfortunately, including the Miami Heat, who are missing Jimmy Butler. We had the Bucks, who had unfortunate injuries to Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, who missed some games as well. We had the Cavaliers, who are banged up, and we had the Pacers, of course, missing Tyrese Halliburton. So tough route for those teams. Easier for the Celtics. Of course, they've been without Kristaps Porzingis for a long stretch here as well, and I think it's still really underrated what his defensive ability and his outside shooting will be able to bring to this team in the finals. That's just horribly underrated, I think, right now, and just not enough of a talking point from what I can ascertain right now. Tatum and Brown has become the point again, going back to their first trip against the Golden State Warriors, of course, a couple years back. Kyrie Irving in the Mavericks playing against the Boston Celtics. Irving's been on 4 different teams now, and he'll be one of the 10 to 12 players that's the face of this player movement era. Of course, almost every player at some point in their careers has changed teams, but Russell Wilson, James Harden, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, a whole bunch of these guys, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Kyrie Irving right in there. LeBron James, all these guys will be the main culprits, per se, the face of this player movement era. So I don't think that's kind of a false story, really. I don't think Kyrie playing the Celtics in the finals is that big of a story, personally. But the Mavericks are the 5 seed. I think the competition in the West was even better than we thought, right? The Thunder lost 4-2 to the Mavericks in the conference semifinals. Very good group there. Shai Gilgeous Alexander, of course, in the running for MVP. Still coming together, that roster there, Chet Holmgren and the Jalen Williams, couple Williams there on the roster. Great group there. Giddey looks like he's on his way out the door after some poor performances, but a great group there. The Timberwolves, of course, we saw the explosion of Anthony Edwards that we'll get to in a moment here. The Nuggets surprisingly collapsing in Game 7 to the Timberwolves. And even the teams that lost in the first round, the Pelicans, the talent that they have there, just trying to figure out the right group of players to put together. The Clippers, the Suns, and the Lakers, all veteran groups that I wrote about a little bit for a piece on michaelwelch.com. Just these veteran groups that don't necessarily have a lot of great cohesion, along with injury problems, limitations, trying to fix the fringes of the roster to round out due to cap problems, and just kind of amazing that they all lost in earlier rounds. But here we are. Mavs have made a run. Luka Doncic, all the way, finally, in year 5 or 6, I believe it is now, to the finals. So not necessarily what we expected to see this season, but Mavs Celtics on the docket for this Thursday, Game 1 of the finals. So I put together a little list here of some players, teams, just who's really won so far, who won the NBA and had a really successful season, really boosted their status. I looked at, the MVP candidates and the most improved players, that kind of thing, but also what guys have really stood out and that really kind of overlapped with some really great playoff performances as well. So first up, regardless of whether they win the title or not, Luka Doncic is a winner, Kyrie Irving's a winner, PJ Washington's a winner, and the Dallas Mavericks in general. Luka led the NBA with 33.9 points per game, so he was the leading scorer, the scoring record player, whatever the goofy title they give the leading scorer in the NBA every year. 33.9 points per game. Second in the league in assists, 9.8, just showing you the impact he has on the offense, and 9.2 rebounds per game. 70 games played, the most since the 18-19 season for him. Career high 37.5 minutes per game, and a career high in field goal attempts as well. He shot 48.7%, 38.2% from 3. Career high 78.6% free throw percentage as well, which was a career high. Third in the MVP voting. Of course, at this point, some arguments could be made that perhaps he should have won it. And, of course, early on in the season, you could say that Embiid would have been the front runner as well. Of course, his health is just going to be a real detriment on his career. Making it to the finals for the first time as a 5 seed. Of course, this roster has been completely rebuilt here. Playoff numbers, 28.8 points per game, 9.6 rebounds, 8.8 assists, 1.6 steals. And he's able to play a little bit more defense as well with Kyrie on the court here. It was always, kind of noted a little bit that if the roster was better around him, perhaps he'd be a more high-impact defensive player. But for the first handful of years in his career, he just really hasn't had that great of an offense. Now, of course, last year, moving on to Kyrie a little bit here, most games played since 18-19, 58 regular season games. He only played 20 with the team last year, did not play in the playoffs. And he takes the scoring load off of Luka at times. They do stagger their minutes. And when they're on the court together, it's very hard to stop the two of them, and it allows Luka to spend a little more effort on the defensive end, especially with his big, 6'7", 6'8" size. So it's very important to what he's able to do on both sides of the basketball. And also, it's worth noting, now defense is very important, of course, in the playoffs. But we're starting to see, especially in the West, that having multiple high-level scorers is becoming more important. The Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was a high-level scorer, and then, it's kind of a collection of guys. For the Timberwolves, it was really Anthony Edwards, and a drop-off after that. Karl-Anthony Towns had his moments, and it was a big resurgence this year, in particular for the point guard there, Connolly, who had a great step up this year at 36 years old or whatever he is now. And the Nuggets, now they have Jokic, they do have Murray, of course, And they're going to have to figure out where their true other offensive piece comes from. But at least they have two offensive pieces there. Now for the Mavericks, obviously, having two future Hall of Famers, and Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, arguably against any of these teams, the top two scorers, or at least a third best scorer, depending on who else you want to put in the mix there. If you want to say Murray at times, if they're playing the Nuggets, is the second best scorer. Any combination, they have two of the best three scorers on the court, or maybe the two best. That matters. And that's something that the Celtics are going to have problems with, even with Tatum, Brown, whoever else you want to throw in the mix there that's having a good night, whether it's White, Porzingis, whatever else the Celtics are able to put on the field there game to game in the finals. But Kyrie Irving, third highest three-point percentage of his 10-plus year career, 41.1%. He was 14th in the NBA in scoring at 25.6 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5.2 assists. In the playoffs, he's shooting 42.1% from three, so his numbers are actually going up against more difficult competition, and he's averaging 22.8 points per game. PJ Washington saw his numbers dip during the 29 regular season games with the Mavericks post-trade from the Hornets, but they increased in the playoffs to 36.3% from three, 13.6 points per game, 6.7 rebounds, and at times they've dipped a little bit. We saw him get banged up at the end of the at the end of the Thunder series a little bit. But he's been very productive for them, particularly hitting big threes in the corner. Hasn't been awesome every single game, but he's been a great number 3 scorer at times when they need him to be, most certainly. So, rookies Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford moving on, splitting time at the center position. They've done a great job. They're great lob threats for Luka. The stat was presented during the Timberwolves Mavericks series that the Mavericks alone had more lob finishes than the rest of the teams in the NBA playoffs combined, which is just an incredible play for them to be able to run there, to try and cut Luka off from driving and playmaking while setting up one of those two in the dunker spot. Just another weapon in the arsenal. Both shooting over 60% in the playoffs. So to revisit, last season, the Mavericks had no Lively because they just drafted him this past offseason. They also just traded for Washington and Gafford, so they're new additions to this lineup. And they also picked up Derek Jones Jr. He was just a new addition. He's shooting almost 50% from the field and 40% from three. So none of those guys were there last season. Then Kyrie Irving, of course, played fewer than 20 games, fewer than 30 games, and no postseason. So very little Kyrie, no PJ Washington, no Gafford, no Derek Jones Jr., and that's the turnaround from the end of last season. Just like a completely rebuilt roster, and a buy-in from Kyrie Irving has completely changed this team around. So just a really successful season, regardless of how the finals goes for the Dallas Mavericks. Now, Anthony Edwards, obviously, placed in the MVP voting. They tally it down to like 10 spots or something. He was outside of the top 5, I believe, but 6, 7, somewhere in there. He received votes. 79 games played in the regular season, 70-plus games played in all 4 years of his career. He's been healthy so far. 25.9 points per game, 46.1% shooting, 5.1 assists, all career highs, 5.4 rebounds per game, 35.7% from three, and he improved defensively. You could add the entire Timberwolves team that was number 1 in defense to this list if you wanted to. Very efficient. One of the best, some of the best defensive metrics as a whole across the board in the history of the league. Although I sometimes wonder when you hear numbers like that, what exactly that means at times, because everything can't be the best. But Rudy Gobert winning Defensive Player of the Year for the 4th time, not quite justifying all the assets they gave up to him to trade for him, but looking very much. I defended the trade at the time a little bit. If you want to get, at the time, the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year and a very important shot-blocking center which they did, and part of it was a new owner coming in wanting to make a big move, then that's what you need to do. Leverage a lot of those assets, a lot of those big picks to get him. You completely overpaid, but if that gets you a run and possibly a championship at some point, but at the very least makes you relevant, you win some series, you help elevate Ant into a better position to improve, that even years forward when Rudy Gobert's retired and Ant's at least able to play on an elevated stage and get that experience to possibly move this franchise forward, I think you're accomplishing something. So this team as a whole, of course, great successful season, but Anthony Edwards in particular exploded as a scorer and really helped push this team through the rounds of the playoffs. The defense was a big part of it, but as I like to say, you hear defense wins championships. Well, points win games, right? He was a very important part of the offense. He was the main driver of the offense, and we do see a lot of numbers for top players actually start to go down a little bit in the postseason. That's not uncommon. You're playing more difficult competition. You're tightening the rotation, and oftentimes more is put on your plate. Higher usage and higher volume of shooting or whatever's required of you to win. For Ant in particular, he shot 40% from 3, 48% from the field, 27.6 points per game, 7 rebounds, 6.5 assists. That's an increase from the regular season numbers. On an extended playoff run, of course, making it to the third round. All of his abilities and his impact elevated against tough competition in the tough Western Conference, heading deeper into the playoffs. Part of that, of course, helped by the defense, but just an incredible job by him there. So, of course, his stock goes way up. Jalen Brunson, in the postseason, averaged 32.4 points per game. The regular season, he was at 28.7. So he, of course, elevated there as well. He was the second leading scorer for the Knicks in the postseason was Dante DiVincenzo at 17.8 points per game, so almost 15 points behind Jalen Brunson, who was also throwing for 7.5 assists, 3.3 rebounds, as a 6'1", 6'2" guard with a screwed up hand. Of course, the roster also wasn't healthy. No Julius Randle, no Mitchell Robinson. Sometimes, of course, that's an addition by subtraction. You figure out some different things with your roster and run some different sets. You get a little creative. Perhaps it was better to not run some of the offense through Julius Randle. Perhaps he won't be part of the team moving forward. The success in the regular season, where they finished as the 2 seed, of course, in the Eastern Conference, and made it to at least the second round before getting upset in Game 7 by the Pacers, has got them back on the board again. Perhaps more attractive to free agents. That's a really, really big deal. Now, in that same vein, Isaiah Hartenstein did very well for himself. He took over Mitchell Robinson's starting spot and made a push for Defensive Player of the Year as a great rim protector, great defender for the Knicks there. Big 7'1" body. He was irrelevant for really the first 3 years of his career, originally drafted by the Rockets, bounced around to some G League teams. I think he was on 3 or 4 different teams, G League teams. He might have even played internationally. I don't pick up a whole lot of sports cards, but I did open his rookie card, his signature, actually, autograph, several years back. And it wasn't worth anything because he was out of the NBA pretty quick before making it back in on a roster. So it was the 21-22 year that the Clippers picked him up. Found room for him in rotation. I believe he played 60-plus games that year, coming off the bench. Good defensive, again, defensive centers playing well in the post, and actual shot blocking, shot deterrent, shooting type of guy is exactly what he is. Good defender in the paint, can block you, forces you to drive out, not attack him. That's what you want. So 21-22 there off the bench for the Clippers. Found his way to the Nets last year, and then found himself off the bench and into the starting rotation with Mitchell Robinson's injury, prolonging and pushing into the playoffs this season. And now he's a desirable free agent for either the Knicks, whether they choose to resign him, or someone else this offseason. It'll be interesting to see where he goes, because of course centers and big bodies are very important, particularly if they can play good defense like he can. He hasn't put up spectacular box score numbers per se. He hasn't put up a lot of 20-point per game type of numbers, but he certainly helps execute pick and rolls on the offensive end. He can finish buckets, but the defensive end in the paint is where he has a big impact. He plays less than 30 minutes a game, but he's still a very important piece and a big deal to what the Knicks have done. Really, really pushed the stock up this year. Now I do have, let's do Cody White first. Colby White from North Carolina, drafted to the Chicago Bulls, of course. His best season was his sophomore season, 2020-2021, but he slumped the past two. Like, numbers across the board steadily decreasing. He was at least a partial starter, mostly a starter, in 2020-2021, and then lost that spot, was coming off the bench. Lonzo Ball, I believe, pushed him out of that starting position. This year, starter again, playing 78 games, shooting higher volumes, scoring 19.1 points per game, shooting 44.7% and 37.6% from three, 4.5 rebounds, 5.1 assists, all career highs. So he's had times where he's been shooting really well, or he's been contributing in different ways, defensively a little bit, assists, rebounds. So different pieces you've seen, but the shooting numbers are either low or he's not getting a lot of playing time. Nothing's quite come together. But here in year 5, he's gotten the time, the playing time. He started, he's getting the shot volume, the shooting percentages are coming up. He's able to not just be a shooter, kind of like Zach LaVine, his teammate here, who's an empty calorie guy. You'll see him take 20 shots, score 30 points, and have zero, steals, assists, rebounds. He's able, Colby White's not that. So this is the perfect culmination in year 5 of able to contribute across the board. Shooting numbers can still be better, and he can be a little bit better on the defensive end as well. But it's really good to see, with questions revolving around this team for the past several years, and we're not sure what the future is going to be with DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic. It's great to see that they have a good player coming along here that can still improve his ceiling. And he was drafted by the Bulls here and is steadily pushing along here, improving, given some time and space, and he's a real prospect now, a real future there in Chicago. He exploded for 42 points against Atlanta in their play-in game. Their first play-in game, a little less stellar when they fell out against the Miami Heat and did not make the playoffs at all. But Colby White looked a hell of a lot better this season for the Chicago Bulls. Next, I have Jamie Jaquez Jr., the rookie, picked up in the late teens there, I believe it was 19th, to the Miami Heat. One of the best rookies of the draft so far. Landed on one of the best coached, maybe one of the best coached teams in the league. Certainly the best head coach. Played 75 games this year. Shot almost 78% from the field. So I must have put that down wrong. From free throw, yeah, from the line. 78% from the line and 32% from three. So he has room to improve there. And 11.9 points per game. He can pass a little bit, plays a little defense, shoots when he needs to. Averaged almost 17 points per game in their brief playoff, 5-game stint there. 3.8 rebounds, 2.6 assists and a steal. He's going to be someone that has a lot of growth potential, and the Heat are going to pump a lot into him as far as seeing how far he can stretch and what Spoelstra can do as far as defensively, offensively. How can they fit him in amongst the players they have? Because they're also salary cap, stretched like a lot of these teams. Most teams are. And trying to figure out what they can do with Bam and Jimmy as core pieces, while also realizing that Tyler Hero's a great shooter, but he's got defensive deficiencies. And they just have a hard time of finding great pieces that work together. He was a great pick. He hung out for a while in college. Perhaps could have gone a little bit earlier. Obviously wasn't a lottery pick. Fell just outside of that and fell into the perfect landing spot here. And has nothing but upside. And was a little bit of a surprise, I guess you could say. Landed in the perfect spot for him. Tyrese Maxey was one of those guys. He played 1 year at Kentucky, of course, coming out and landing in the 76ers at the back end of the first round a few years back. And your first thoughts, if you'd watched enough college ball, was, man, he seems like the best guy that didn't go in the lottery, and like he's going to have a lot of potential. And he's continued to elevate his game. Jamie Jaquez is one of those guys as well. He's got decent size, and he seems like a smart player, and he just seems like he can do a little bit of everything. And Spoelstra's going to, as soon as he becomes great in a few areas, he's going to become just an excellent, excellent basketball player. Jalen Suggs increased his field goal percentage to 47.1, his three-point percentage to 39.7. Those are great numbers. Both over 5% increases from last season, which would have put them at not very good numbers. So he's increased his offensive ability. Of course, this is a very defensive-centric Orlando Magic team. They need someone else that can score. Suggs hasn't quite been that. Heading into year 4, that'll be more critical. But he's also become one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. He's become very important to what they have going on there as far as... Well, I still think they still have some pieces to sort out as far as what the guard lineups are going to look like if they're going to really win in the playoffs, right? If Jalen Suggs, you do have Cole Anthony, you have Markelle Fultz, you just drafted Anthony Black. So he looks to be a key piece of that group now. He's locked in, I think, as a real starter where that wasn't a sure thing before. And you got Paolo Banchero, who's obviously the star of that team, a ball handler, a physical body that can drive through folks on the offensive end and keep his body in front of folks on defense. And he's someone who's I'm really excited to watch moving forward. But they're one of the young teams in the league that they really have to sift through and see, not only in making the playoffs, but if we're going to make a playoff run, a championship run at some point, who are like the 7 guys that we care about? You're going to have to start and sift through. Is Franz Wagner going to be one of the main guys? Is Jonathan Isaac going to be a main guy? Is Wendell Carter going to actually be a main guy? He's great now. But we're going to add more pieces to continue to win, and that's going to bump some guys out by default. And you have to see which guys, whether it's on the defensive end, offensive end, which characteristics from these players, which guys, and what they bring to the table. What arrangement do you want of your pieces here? And I think he's starting to lock in as a core piece moving forward as he continues to develop his offensive game and become one of the best, certainly on-ball defenders. I have to watch a little bit more of his off-ball defense, but his defensive metrics have been phenomenal. And it certainly looks like him and Paolo, at least, will be locked in as key pieces moving forward for the Orlando Magic, at least at this time. Now, someone I'm so excited for, G.G. Jackson of the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, a lot of folks, Bill Simmons, pretty much anyone that covers just the NBA and not college basketball, was shocked by this guy. Of course, Memphis's season went downhill pretty quickly with John Morant injury. We had, Desmond Bane coming back from injury. We had Dylan Brooks being traded so that, even if everyone had come back healthy, you would have at least had to figure out that 5th starting spot. But we had catastrophe all over, nothing quite sorted as far as a steady starting lineup, let alone rotations and a solid bench. And so everything was a disaster from the beginning for the Memphis Grizzlies this year. And that led us to G.G. Jackson. And 48 games played. 35% from 3, 14.6 points per game, 12 20-plus point games, 4 30-plus point games, a 44-point game as they just let him shoot the hell out of the ball in the season finale. A lot of folks confused about how he dropped to the second round, ended up with the Memphis Grizzlies, and even got on the court, really. But I believe Memphis played like 30 different guys this year simply because dudes were hurt and they weren't making the playoffs, so let's just play a whole bunch of dudes. He had a disaster of a year at South Carolina. Part of it seemed like his attitude. Part of it seemed like the coach wanted to make a point at times of punishing him a little bit. He was on Instagram Live, talking about his coach at one point, trashing his coach at one point, which didn't quite seem appropriate. He didn't shoot particularly well, but looked like he had skill and had the ability, but just he's still only 19 years old. It'll be a couple months into next season before he turns 20. He's just a super young guy, and big level of college basketball. He just wasn't quite mature enough to handle it yet. It didn't seem like he was quite mature enough yet to handle Memphis. There are a few write-ups about how he got in trouble a few times with the coaching staff there. Several times. But he hit the court, played almost 50 games, was great offensively. He certainly had his bad games as well. But again, young kid, not a consistent lineup that he played with either, and has plenty of room to grow, and should come off the bench once they get a cohesive group together, starting group together next year, and should work his way into the pieces they were sifting through this year, should make his way into a bench lineup for next season. But the SEC, man, continues to find these every year. We know there's going to be a great one-and-done player coming off of one of these bad SEC teams. Anthony Edwards came off a bad Georgia team. We knew they were going to be bad. Ben Simmons went and played for LSU on a year that we knew they weren't going to be very good. Neither of those guys made the tournament on their respective years. I believe Scottie Pippen Jr. played it at Vanderbilt, I believe it was. Not that he's been outstanding in his NBA tenure, but another player who has room to develop, playing on a not very good SEC team for 1 year. And here we have G.G. Jackson 1 year at South Carolina on a not good South Carolina year. So that seems like a regular thing, Which 4 or 5 bottom feeders are we going to have at the college level in the SEC this year? And is there a sneaky good NBA prospect that's going to be in the NBA next year? Seems like a fun trend. I know I'm missing some other prospects here as I think about it off the top of my head. It seems to be a regular thing now, and G.G. Jackson was one of them. I remember in the draft watching him slip and fall all the way down the second round, not even the back end of the first. I'm like, man, if he could end up in not even the right place, just a young guy, seems like he can score, but getting drafted and then finding your way into a lineup is just difficult. Getting out of the G League and getting onto the back end of a bench is the start. Stars aligned, perfect for him to get a chance with what seems like a good staff there. One of the better staffs in the league there right now, in the Memphis Grizzlies, are getting an opportunity, and he'll have a chance to really grow next season. So G.G. Jackson, sometimes it's luck. He may have a career because of the disaster season that the Memphis Grizzlies had this year. And finally, a couple obvious ones. Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama were all that we could expect at this point. They had a couple showdowns, played great against each other. They both look like the long alien bodies that we expected. Can't wait to see more from Victor, of course. What else could we expect? He led the Spurs in scoring. He played 71 games. 71 games. Almost 30 minutes a game. So he could increase playing time, certainly, in more high-impact games. 21.4 points per game, 10.6 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.2 steals, 3.6 on the season, 3.7 turnovers. Now, his numbers got better towards the back end of the season, and he could be a top 10 player next year. He could receive MVP votes next year. He could be all-star next year. He could be defensive player of the year next year. He's that high impact. An athletic body that can run the floor, can shoot from everywhere on the court, and on defense, get back and attack the block, make it out to the perimeter when he's standing out in the paint, or hustle back to the paint when he's out on the perimeter. That's just incredible. And on the fast break to get back on defense and make fast break offensive possessions difficult for a team. That's pretty unique too. So he's just incredible to watch. And Chet Holmgren, of course, he is not Wemby, but he played 82 games, all 82 regular season games, 16.5 points, third scorer behind Shea and Jalen Williams on the Oklahoma City Thunder, 7.9 rebounds a game, 2.4 assists. Got down on the turnovers a bit there, and it would be nice if he added more muscle, certainly. Now, Wemby as well, but Chet in particular, it seems like could bulk up a little bit there. The three-point shooting numbers for him were at 37% as well, which is pretty phenomenal. 53% from the court. Victor Wembanyama was sitting right at, let's see here. He was shooting from the floor on the season at 46.5%, 32.5% from three. But he was shooting at a much higher volume. And again, if it comes to a point, it's not going to be next year. But when it comes to the point that they actually have a team around him there in San Antonio, and they're pushing for like a championship, which I hope could be 2 years from now, would be great. Get some picks around there, some players, some free agents. Yeah, very desirable to go play with him there in San Antonio. That he's going to become more efficient just with better players around him. So, just being what we expected this year for Victor and Chet, it makes them two of the winners of the NBA season. Thanks for checking back in after a couple-month break here. Sorry if the audio is a little bit off on this one. I was trying a little bit different platform here, but the tools will continue to update with what I'm working on here. So it'll clear up, is what I'm saying. But thanks for checking in. Be working on some more material coming up here as we're on the college basketball, football off season, but finishing up NBA finals, obviously finishing up the season here, but excited for the finals and off season for NFL, obviously. But we'll tackle some more topics as I count down to my 100th episode here. Excited for that. So thanks for tuning in to the 92nd episode as I come back here, and I appreciate the support. Talk to you later. Bye.
Don't forget the money, man.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a